Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you love the film as much as we all do, and we're so pleased that you've joined us for this panel discussion. We have a really amazing panel lined up, and we're going to have a really wonderful discussion. My name is Tara Lyons. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm faculty in the Department of Criminology at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And I'm so honored to be part of this event today, celebrating January and as part of Transgender Day of Awareness. So I want to make one note for the program before we get started. Alina Gress, who is one of the filmmakers for My Name Was January, and she's also a KPU journalism alumni, she unfortunately can't be here. She's on a remote journalism assignment, a work assignment without any Wi-Fi, and she's very disappointed to not be here with us today. So that's the bad news. But the good news is that we have Lenee Son here, who is the second filmmaker for My Name Was January, and also a KPU alumni. And so we welcome the panelists. And what we'll start by doing is I'm going to ask everyone to briefly introduce yourselves. You'll do a better job than I will. So briefly introduce yourself, and please offer the audience an opening remark to get us started. So I will start with Lenee.
Hi, everyone. I am so incredibly honored to be here today. I'm a Khmer Krom settler and multimedia storyteller. I grew up here in Surrey on Kwantlen, Katsi, Semiahmoo, and Coquitlam territories. I've been involved in community activism and advocacy for a few years, taking part in grassroots movements against racial profiling, police violence, gentrification, and poverty. And I'm dedicated to involving my intersectional analysis, and I'm committed to promoting human rights through my work, which led me to meeting Alex in Share Vancouver, and I'm incredibly honored to have been able to tell January's story, and I thank January's family and friends, including Velvet and Alex, for the trust that they have given me to tell her story. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Velvet.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me here. I'm so blessed to be here, especially in honor of January. So a little bit about myself. I sort of became an activist in an organic sense, and I sort of, go between advocate and activist because they, depending on the social circles I'm dealing with or the people I'm talking to, they have different impact. And I had the pleasure of meeting Alex and Lenee and the rest of the gang in the production of this one. I read about her passing in the news, and as a friend of her, it really struck me really hard at the gym doing these, my exercises and things. And I just needed to reach out, and I'm really happy that I did reach out. And as a result of that, I've been able to sort of get my message heard a little bit more, actually a lot more, talk to individuals about the trials and tribulations that people in my community go through, and create that much more of an awareness and open some eyes. And I really hope that that is what is going to come from this today for all of you viewers out there too, a structured and stronger awareness, as well as compassion, and hopefully bring you on board as allies.
Thanks so much, Velvet. Jack.
Hi, my name is Jack Kennedy. I am a non-binary person, and my pronouns are they and them. I live in Coquitlam on the traditional unceded territory of the Coquitlam people. I am a Kwantlen student. I am a creative writing major and an anthropology minor. And I do my best to advocate for trans rights, for queer rights, Black Lives Matter. But I would like to get more into the activism scene. I'm honored to be on this panel with all these amazing people, and to honor January's memory and just the memory of all our lost trans siblings on this day of Trans Day of Remembrance.
Thank you, Jack. Over to you, Alex.
So hi, everyone. My name is Alex Sangha. I'm the founder of Share Vancouver, which is a social cultural support nonprofit for queer South Asians and friends. We welcome everyone. And I'm so grateful that we have this opportunity to remember January and all trans women of color, and all victims of violence on the Transgender Day of Remembrance. You know, I'm so grateful to KPU and the KDocs Film Festival. I feel like we're coming full circle, because if it wasn't for Kwantlen and the two women of color journalism students, Alina Gress and Lenee Son, this film really wouldn't have happened. And they spent 3 years, can you imagine, on this project, and they were committed and they were loyal, and they really learned on the job. And I was a first-time producer, so we all just were putting our heads together and we got the film out. It was a passion project, really. And we wanted to remember January's legacy and honor her and have a eulogy and a memorial. And I'm so grateful for that. And we do have something else to remember January Marie LaCruz. We have the January Marie LaCruz Youth Leadership Award. It's open to anyone 16 to 30. We have over $2,500 in cash prizes donated by Diversity Community Resources Society to give out. The only criteria is you be between 16 and 30, and that you be doing some kind of leadership or volunteer work in the queer community. You can be any sexuality, any gender identity, any ethnicity. Everyone is welcome to apply. And we hope all you students out there and everyone watching apply. Just go to the Share Vancouver website, sharevancouver.com, SHER Vancouver.com, and click on Youth Award, and everything is spelled out on what we need to receive for your application. And the deadline is December 31st, 2020. So get your application in fast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. And you know, what a legacy January has left in terms of her community and the award and this film. It's really amazing. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was, in the film, I loved hearing the stories about January. I unfortunately never met January, and hearing her friends talk about just how wonderful she was, how she was the social glue and so fun, and how she showered people with love. You know, it didn't matter who they were, that she would just seem so loving and kind. And that was something that really stuck with me, that I felt like I came away knowing a little bit more about January, this incredible person. And so I was wondering if any of you had additional stories that you wanted to tell us about January. So it could be something that didn't make it into the film or something that you thought about after. But I just wanted to share present the opportunity to share more stories about January if you would like. So you could jump in on this one if you have.
Well, I'll jump right in here. I met January early on in her transition, and you know, she's coming through the salon that I used to own in Gastown, and when she came in there, it was just, you know, we were already loud, proud, and colorful ourselves, myself and my business colleague, in terms of owning of the salon, and as transsexual women, and that's the word that I do use. And January came in there looking for a little bit of guidance and help. It was very clear that when she walked through the door, wow, she was just electric and alive. And I know Alex can share this memory as well, but one of the things that always keeps coming to my mind is how she would always make light and have fun with situations. And she always talked about how, oh, it's pretty dark outside or it's pretty cold outside, but I make it hotter, right? You know, stuff like that. And she always turned, you know, maybe a gloom and doom situation is something super positive. And that really struck with me. So every time she came into the salon after that to visit or say hello or get her hair done or to learn other things or invite us out in a social sense outside of the salon, which we really enjoyed and really sort of relished, our clients had the best of time with her. They were laughing. We were always laughing. It was so much fun. She was fun. She really epitomized that.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Velvet is saying. January was so funny. She would just make everyone crack up and laugh and laugh and laugh. And you know, she has so much self-confidence. Like, oh my God, I've never met a woman who could just pick up so many guys anywhere at any time. And she was so self-confident in her presentation, in her personality, in her appearance, in her. And I'll tell you one thing, if you were a friend of January and someone crossed you, she would go all out and defend you. So she was a really loyal and a really strong person, and she really fought for her friends and what she believed in. And I mean, she was a survivor. You know, she had a tough life, so she knew how to survive, and she knew how to, you know, take care of herself and her friends.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really wish she was still here with us today and she had the opportunity to be here with us today on this panel. This event is part of Trans Day of Remembrance, and it's a day to pause and remember and honor those whose lives were taken by anti-trans violence, including January's. And so what do you think January would like us to know on this day, on Trans Day of Remembrance? Or what do you think her key message would be if she was invited to be on a panel like this? What would she want us to know, or what would her key message be about Trans Day of Remembrance?
It's hard to say because she was so multifaceted, but I know one thing that she really had was a great love of people in general. She was always talking about loving people, love, love, love. I mean, if there was a negative, she would always try to find a positive. And I really think that that would be a message that would be very dear to her heart. You know, she talked about a lot of different things, and then she would flip it. She would flip it into a positive, and that really resonated with me because I really believe in the same as well. And to have someone of like mind start saying that, and she, you know, she was younger than me, quite a bit younger. I'm no spring chicken anyway. So she was, you know, electric and alive, and this love, as Alex said, from someone who is a survivor, who's lived a life that's been pretty colorful and somewhat difficult, really resonates with me, and I really think that that's something she would like to take and to be happy that we're here talking about.
And I just want to say again with all this, and one thing I loved about January was she really looked at people as human beings. She had gone through so much oppression and discrimination because she was different in so many ways that whenever she saw someone suffering or was alienated or isolated or alone, or she really reached out and gave them a hug. And we started the Share Vancouver Christmas donation program at our Christmas party because of January. She wanted to go and give food to people on the downtown east side, and she really, because she suffered so much, she has so much compassion and empathy for other people, and she really wanted to boost their spirits. And that was such a wonderful thing about her. She didn't see anyone based on color or anything, or any discrimination. She just saw people and human beings and loved everyone.
Okay, great, thank you. So this next question is for all of you, but I would like to give Lenee and Jack the opportunity to kick it off. The film is described as a celebration of January and other trans women of color's lives, as well as about collectively liberating all marginalized and oppressed people. Like you're talking about, it seems really January's message was about loving all people and making lives better. So I'm wondering if you can talk about some ways that we can work towards this liberation. It's kind of, think of it as, it can be a call for action, if you will. So what are some things that we can do, particularly those of us who are white settlers and those of us who are cis? What are our responsibilities, and what are some things that we can do to achieve this goal of the film and of January's, to liberate all marginalized and oppressed people?
I think that if we need to really listen to marginalized voices, uplift those voices. So not only just listen, you need to put in the effort to make sure that they are heard. Because if you're just listening but not spreading the message, then it's not going to go very far. Especially of trans women of color, especially of people of color who are very, very marginalized and endangered in our society right now based on the social structures that are in place. So I think we really just need to do more effort and more legwork into uplifting these voices and just taking the time to step back, look at your own biases and let them speak and let them tell you what you can do. And not only that, but you need to do the legwork to do your own research. There's so many resources out there. There's so many articles and like studies and just like think pieces by people of color, by trans people, by trans women of color. And those pieces are there for you to educate yourself and not just rely on people to tell you what to do.
Yeah, I think just echoing what Jack said, I think to undo trans misogyny is to constantly examine the ways in which we participate in trans misogyny, to continuously examine the ways that we maintain colonial gender roles, and in doing that is to be uncomfortable, to push past any cis guilt or white settler guilt, to be uncomfortable, to ask yourself those hard questions, and also not to rely on the labor of trans and non-binary people, as well as sex workers, as well as people of color, and to do that work, to be more than an ally is more than, it's pushing yourself to take action, and in taking action is taking action to learn, to be better, to be a better ally, to protect, prioritize, and amplify trans voices, particularly Black, Indigenous, and POC voices.
Great, thanks so much. And Velvet and Alex, I invite you to jump in as well.
Well, I echo the comments and the sentiments. And, you know, for me, it really goes back to the whole idea of allies and having voices heard. For me, you know, I think about the whole idea within the sex worker community as well, because I know Lenee brought that up. And I just want to remind people as well that on Tuesday, it was International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers, which is super important for me. And I know it would be super important for January. And within that community, a lot of the activism has taken place around the fact of the edict or the line of nothing about us without us. You know, so you can't have people at the table that aren't going to be from that community. You can't make decisions without hearing their voices, without actively listening to them. And one of the things that I really have learned is that there's not a lot of active listening going on when it comes to individuals who want to help out marginalized communities. They think they've got your best interest at heart. And how many times I've heard that statement really irks me, because I don't really believe that they do have the best interest at heart. It's more of an ego situation, you know, to make that individual look good or to make them to feel good. I mean, and granted, that doesn't apply to everybody because there are a lot of good and great allies out there. But really, you know, people need to be heard. They need to be listened to. They need to be at the table when the decision-making processes are going down, or the analyzations, anything of that. So.
Yeah, I just want to mention one of the reasons we wanted to have trans women in the film, and one of the reasons, I mean, maybe Lenee can expand on this and have the trans women of color perspective, is we didn't have January there. So we wanted that lived experience. We wanted to know, we wanted to provide trans women of color and trans women with that self-determination to express and voice their issues, their concerns, their challenges, and their strengths. And another thing, which one thing I've learned since I produced My Name is January, is that everything is a constant learning process. It's all education. It all comes down to education. I mean, before January died, transgender issues were not on my radar. I have to confess, they were not on my radar. But after she died, and especially after the film came out, I'm always constantly reading about trans issues, learning about trans issues. I'm seeing it all over the Facebook, sometimes good, sometimes traumatic, sometimes bad. So I really think education is a big part of awareness and social awareness, and that can affect behavior and change behavior for the better. And one thing I'm really proud that Lenee and Alina did with My Name is January, there's so much feedback that I got back from film festivals and broadcasters and people who watched the film, was that you weren't preaching to anyone in the film about what to think and what not to think. People walked away with their own feeling on the film, their own thinking on the film, and they came to their own decisions about, this was a woman who went through a lot of difficulty. She was loved, and yet she has so many strengths. And people walked out empathizing with her, understanding her situation. And they said, you know what, I learned a lot about this, and that transgender women are women, and transgender women are just human beings. And they walked away feeling that January, the story of My Name Was January, was a true, authentic story of learning about a human being. And that's what I really liked how Lenee and Alina, that was the feedback I got from so many people. And that's what I really liked how the film came across.
Great, thank you. We have some questions from the audience. And so this one is from Janice. And Janice says, thank you for mentioning sex workers, Velvet. Can you speak to the specific role of trans folks in the sex worker movement?
It's very difficult to get individuals engaged for several reasons. And the first one is for fear of being outed. You know, for the most part, a lot of trans sex workers that are out there doing what they're doing just want to live happy lives. And, you know, they want to be incognito for the most part. If we look to our neighbors to the south in the United States and see what's going on there, you know, the deaths of trans sex workers is exorbitant. It's outrageous. It's you know, and the fact that they're being swept under the rug really disheartens me. So trying to get out there to get individuals to be a part of it. Number one, they're in fear for their lives. They're in fear for being outed. Maybe their families don't know, their friends don't know, their living situations don't know. And the fact that we're here in Canada, even though the sale of sex is, you know, legal, the fact of purchasing is still illegal. So, you know, the onus from the Protection of Community Exploited Persons Act, Bill C-36, that was put through with the Progressive Conservative government in 2015. So the Supreme Court of Canada in the Bedford decision overturned the laws at that time in 2014. They had a year to, you know, fix those laws. And instead what they did was they took it off the sex worker and flipped it onto the client. And then they also put in Section 218, which also put the onus still on the sex workers. So which we thought, you know, we didn't see that coming because we were just so excited celebrating the decision from the Supreme Court of Canada. You know, and they are super marginalized. And, you know, even within the sex worker community, trans sex workers face a lot of difficult situations because they're just not accepted. They're not validated, you know, and yet they've been, you know, sex workers for the most part have been trying to validate sex work as work for the whole. And with it, you know, and within the community itself, the irony is that they don't treat trans sex workers as, you know, valid. So it's a very soft, touchy situation that I don't currently believe has any answers really. You know, I'm part of the British Columbia Coalition of Experiential Communities, and we're working on some initiatives currently right now that we hope that we can bring to the public in the near future. And we will be engaging with more trans sex workers as well, because they have such a unique experience that can bring so much to the table, that can also, the intersectionality of the work that they do also plays into cisgendered sex workers too. So we really need to have their voices at the table and to give them that, you know, validation that they so desperately need and require on so many levels. So there's a bit of work to do, a lot of work to do, but that's what we're doing right now.
Thanks, Velvet. I wanted to come back to pick up on what you were saying and also link back to International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers. And we know that transphobia intersects with poverty and racism and colonialism, as well as the criminalization of sex work, which you were just talking about. And we know that this harms sex workers and trans and non-binary and two-spirit people, particularly those who are Black, Indigenous people of color. So a question for all of you on the panel, because this can be broader, is what do you think needs to change to eliminate violence against trans, non-binary, and two-spirit people? And it can be specifically around people who work in the sex industry, but it doesn't have to be in terms of, you know, Trans Day of Remembrance, what needs to change. Jack was talking earlier about social structures. Maybe you can flesh out what some of those are for some of the people in the audience, but I open it to all of you. What needs to change to stop violence against trans, non-binary, and two-spirit people?
Wow, it's a lot needs to change. Education needs to start, and you need to be engaging with individuals, and it needs to be done in a manner where you're going to get people to listen to you. And sometimes that's a really hard situation to do. The whole aspect is so intersectional with daily lives, with quote unquote regular lives, regular work lives. You talk about sex workers, you talk about, trans individuals, you talk about anybody part of the queer community, and I do use queer, and of course, and I lovingly call it the bacon, lettuce, tomato, cheese sandwich, because there's always ingredients being added to it, and I love a delicious sandwich, to be honest with you. I like taking a healthy, juicy bite out of it, so yay. But when you think about that, one of the things that I always talk about when I'm doing my presentations is people always ask, well, why are trans folks so sensitive? And that question can be applied to sex workers. It can be applied to persons of color. It can be applied to Indigenous. It can be applied to anybody, and for people who are in fear of their lives or their living accommodations, their jobs, for example, their communities, identification is a big one as well. Getting your ID properly done, living a life and not worrying about walking out the door with the fear of being assaulted. And some of them, a lot of people we just want to live happy, healthy lives. It doesn't have to be some big, huge confrontational fight when you walk out the door all the time. Personally, myself, I never know what's going to happen when I walk out the door. And I always walk out the door with that knowledge that something probably is going to happen to me, some form of assault. And that can be whether it's verbal, physical, or emotional. And they're all just as equally impactful in my eyes. There's other people that won't agree with that, but I think it really starts in the home, it starts in the schools, it starts in whatever opportunity you can be. And I always like to be the best ambassador for the community that I can possibly be by educating individuals. And, we all have a degree of ignorance to ourselves. And I don't use ignorant in a negative sense. But when I talk about ignorance, there's ways of asking questions if you come from a place of ignorance, whether it's redneck ignorance, because that question can be, presented to a person in a manner where it gets your back up. You feel the prickles on your back up over your head, and it's like, oh, I'm not going to answer that question. There's ways of presenting it. And I always like, rather than redneck, I'd rather it came from a caressed neck. And that's how I look at that. If someone comes from a place of wanting to know, genuine longing to learn and compassion, I am going to step up to be the best damn ambassador I can be for my community and beyond, and answer it to the best of my knowledge and direct those folks to where they can better get knowledge and possibly be beside me, my ally, whatever.
Well, Velvet, now I'm hungry for a queer sandwich.
They are
thinking
delicious.
About caressed necks, the best terms. Jack and Lenee, did you want to add anything?
I definitely agree that there's a lot of onus on trans people and people of color to educate people when, like I said, there's a lot of places you can go to educate yourself. And I think that education definitely has to start at a younger age. We need more trans education in schools, especially when it comes to sex education, because I remember from my schooling, which was not that long ago, you didn't get any. It was very heterosexual centered, very cisgender centered. And no, I didn't even know the questions to ask to get a better education because it just wasn't given to me. And that's a story for so many queer people, so many LGBT people, so many trans people. Just they don't have that options. And when it comes to social structures that I mentioned, there's just so many barriers and so many hoops to jump through to just be seen as who you want to be seen as, to just be validated as a person. I recently went through and got my name legally changed, which is very exciting, but cost me $300, right? And I had to go and I had to do a criminal record check. I had to go and get assessed. And when I was doing top surgery consultations, I had to get assessed to make sure I was trans enough to go and get a top surgery. But for cis people, they never have to do anything like that. They can just live as they want to live and look how they would like to look, for the most part at least. And there's just not these monetary structures involved. There's not these social and legal documents that have to be changed and everything for them, because they already have the names and the genders like marker that they were born with, and it's easier for them. So at least in my trans experience, because I can't speak to people of color, though I know there are a lot of barriers when it comes to getting opportunities there as well. But as a trans person, I just know that I have so many hoops to jump through that cis people don't have to jump through. And so dismantling those structures will go a long way to just educating and giving people more opportunities to be safe and be happy with who they are.
And I just want to comment on what Velvet was going back to sex work. So you have doctors, you have lawyers, you have social workers, you have teachers. They all have their own they have their own associations, they have their own colleges, and those professions decide themselves how they want to be governed, how they want to be, what happens with their profession. But when it comes to sex work, they don't have any rights. They get no workers' compensation, they get no employment insurance. They're not allowed to have their own destiny. They're not allowed to determine themselves what is best for their own people. And this is what I find this very disturbing, because the number one principle of social work, and I'm a social worker, is self-determination, where the people that it impacts and the people that it affects should be the ones who are directing that decision-making. So I don't know what Velvet thinks, but I mean, I've done so many presentations on My Name Was January now, and I'm sitting there in the class, and a lot of students, and I'm surprised how many women have this idea that, their way is the highway, and that, sex work should be, illegal, and it does harm and all this. The way I see it, the current situation, the status quo does harm. It puts sex workers at risk. It puts them at risk of violence. They have really no rights and no benefits, nothing. And I find this is an area that, because I'm not a sex worker, so I'm careful what I say, but I do feel they should definitely be consulted and they have really, really strong decision-making on how their profession unfolds. That's what I think.
I'm going to jump back to Jack's statement earlier about, getting your legal name changed, which is freaking fabulous. I love it. And, and when I changed my name, it cost me a ton of money. But at the time that I did it, here in BC, I didn't have to do a criminal record check. So when I hear that people have to do that, I really find that super interesting, because what does that mean? It's like, wow, so I can't change my name because somehow you're going to deem me as a criminal, but I'm not afforded any sort of human rights to be able to do that. And of course, and that also brings it back to, like, why are trans folks so sensitive? So that's a generic question that, you can think about when you're wondering what's going on. And I also throw in the epiphany point. There's something that I've termed, and so I just say it's an EP moment, right? People are, it's like you might be expressing some moodiness or personality or anger or sadness or whatever. So people are like, oh, why are you so like this? Why are you so like that? And then they think about all these, oh, well, that makes sense. It's because you're trans. What? Really? Why should that be like that? Because I'm a person, I should be afforded the same rights as everybody else. And then moving over to what Alex said, and I just want to touch with, when I had to change my name, I had to print my old name and my new name in a private political newspaper, public newspaper, and a community newspaper. So what does that say? That totally outed me. That took away my rights and privacy and safety and protections. And I'm not sure that you have to do that now today, because I haven't looked into it, but I know it's just as complicated to do it. But to go back to the whole sex worker thing, with the British Columbia Coalition of Experiential Communities, what we did, because sex workers have, and thank you for bringing up COVID, they have been left out of any sort of funding or financial help with our government, our federal government. And CERB did not affect it, especially for those who believe in their job and pay their taxes. Is the irony here too, as well as our Canadian government still wants their tax money, regardless of what kind of job you're doing, to be honest. And then when they find out, well, then you face all the retribution. And I'm sure many of you know the hashtag glory hole. that was done here in BC. Well, we printed that document out, and somehow it made its way into the hands of the CDC. Well, we know how it did. But we were a little bit angry about that because we had to address that, because it was originally put out there as a way to protect sex workers in this current climate. And that's who it was originally for. And they were effectively left out of the discussion. They were left out of any sort of compensation or any sort of aid to keep themselves alive and keep themselves going. Again, being marginalized and put into the darkness, put into the corners, hidden away, under society's regular mainstream rug. And it was really quite sad. So yes, we did have to correct that with the media, and they were like, oh yeah, we put that document out, and it was addressing how sex workers were left out of any sort of compensation or benefit.
We have a number of questions now. Thank you, audience. I'm going to start with a comment though, and this is from Janice. I'm just going to read it here. This is why an event such as this, where persons such as all of you who take risks and put themselves out there, are so vital, if for no other reason than simple recognition and acknowledgement that trans people exist. The work you all do is so risky, but so monumental to any change going forward. I wish you didn't have to bear all the weight though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that the next question I'll go with is, how would the panel recommend going about confronting closed-minded people about these issues, whether it be online hate speech or even friends making ignorant comments in daily conversations? What advice or tips do you have on going about this in the best way? How do we call out, how do we call out these folks?
I don't have a lot of tips because I'm very guilty of letting ignorant people misgender me, because I just don't always feel safe correcting them, especially as someone who uses unconventional pronouns. But I think if you're with friends, especially, calling out that ignorance is important, because they're someone who you spend a lot of time with. And if you let them continue to have ignorant thoughts or ignorant opinions about people, then you're not doing anybody any favors. And that unfortunately makes you a little complicit in my mind. However, if you don't feel safe calling someone out, I think that's okay, because you have to protect yourself as well. And it doesn't make you any less of an ally, but don't let that be your norm. Don't be afraid to call someone out, especially if you can do so in an anonymous setting and block people, like online offers. Providing links to resources that helped you, or talking to someone who is of that group, and not necessarily bringing them into the conversation, but asking their opinion, because you don't necessarily want to put them in danger or at risk of being attacked either. But having conversations with your friends or people you know who are part of marginalized groups, and then that gives you the education to educate other people, and not always put people like trans people or people of color in danger of having to always correct people. So I think just educating yourself 100%, and then using the knowledge you found to counteract ignorant opinions online or in person. And that is the job of an ally, is to help protect people who are in those communities.
Thanks, Jack.
It gets a little tiring having to deal with that on a daily basis or on a continual basis. I love what Jack says, and you're going to have a great future ahead of yourself by being an activist. I can tell you that right now. But at a certain point, sometimes you have to disengage and hope that your allies can take up the slack, because we have jobs to do, lives to live, and happiness to nurture. And it makes it really difficult when you're continually pulling knives out of your back and you're looking at what's going on over your shoulder, because that, for the most part, is what someone who's trans is experiencing daily. to fit in with society, you're always doing some sort of presentation. And for me, there's a difference between presentation and expression. You know, and I can explain that later if folks are interested in hearing that. But the bottom line is there's, you know, the hyper masculinity, there's the hyper femininity that comes from many people within the community, that just to fit in and to not be, you know, looked at or gawked at, or had somebody say something to you or assault you in some way, shape, or form, it's really taxing. And, you know, and really what it boils down to, like I said before, is you just want to live healthy, happy lives. And, you know, and for me, I remember doing a chat out at UBC for one of the professors out there and at their classes. And the question came up is like, well, who are your friends? How do you protect yourself? You know, who do you have around you? And I said, well, obviously and truthfully, I protect myself with big muscular people who can step up to the plate. And what that really boils down to is I have people around me who are not scared to defend me, to stand up for my rights, because they see how taxing and how tiring that can be. And, you know, and they don't have to be muscular. That was just one of my way of joking, because I use comedy so much and humor in my presentations, because it helps me sometimes get through the day. It helps me get through certain situations and life situations, because it can be super stressful. And I don't really believe that a lot of people know that or understand that.
And I just want to follow up on that. For me, I've been in a lot of experiences within my family, my extended family, with my work that I do. I'm a counselor, social worker in North Delta, and I say two things usually. You should do no harm. Whatever you're doing, you should really be doing no harm to anyone. And if you are doing harm, you need to look at yourself. And the other question is, if they don't know, if the person does not know if they're doing harm or not, if they're not sure if they're doing harm, then they have to look at empathy. Put yourself in that person's situation and then ask yourself, am I harming myself, or is this a good thing, or is this a bad thing? And then usually they can figure it out. A lot of people really just don't have the knowledge or the education, and they're ignorant, and they say politically incorrect stuff, or they really don't know how they're harming another person. So to me, it's those two things, you know, ask yourself, am I harming this person? And if you don't know, put yourself in their shoes and use empathy.
Yeah, and I just want to say that as an ally, I think it, like others have echoed, it's important to recognize that it should never be on the labor of trans and non-binary and sex workers. As an ally, I think the work we're advocating should be taken up by cis, by white folks, by non-Indigenous, non-Black folks, and non-POC folks. It's our job to fight against patriarchy and trans misogyny and the systems that uphold the oppression that our siblings experience. It's our duty and our responsibility to push past any of the guilt that we might be feeling, to ask ourselves hard questions, to create spaces that go beyond providing a space of safety. It needs to go beyond that, and it needs to be a space where not only can trans, non-binary, sex worker folks feel safe, but also, and feel safe and survive, but also thrive. And I think that's the work that is on us to do. And it's something that's continuous. It's a constantly evolving process, and to fight for trans liberation, to fight for sex workers liberation is something that is never ending, and we can always be better allies and continue fighting.
Great, thank you all so much. I would like to, we're nearing the end of our panel, and I would like to move to some questions about the film making process. And we have one from Dan G, who asks, one effect of the film for this viewer was wanting to see more of January. The more I learned about her from the interviews, I was wanting to see more of January than I learned about her from the interviews. Was this a deliberate choice on the filmmaker's part to make her impact on others' lives tell the story? Or was this more of an issue of not having enough footage or photos of January to include? Not a criticism, by the way, because this approach was effective, but I was hoping for a final montage of images giving us January in all her glory.
So it was a little bit of both, but we also didn't have a lot of footage of January. All of her friends and family sent us as much footage as they could gather, but we did have limited sources to use in the film.
Okay, thank you. And this question is from Dan L. And this is a question again for you, Lenee. Congratulations on directing a very assured, important, and poignant documentary. Do you have plans to direct more films or to pursue further creative projects about trans lives or other subjects?
Yeah, I've always been passionate about multimedia storytelling, and I think I will always be passionate about evolving my intersectional analysis and promoting human rights through my work. And as someone who is cisgendered, if I can support my trans and non-binary siblings in amplifying voices, then I would love to be able to share more stories and amplify those stories.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I'd like to go back to another comment about specific things we can do around advocacy or activism. My sense is from the audience questions that there's a real desire to make improvements, perhaps in their own lives or in their communities, to better improve trans, non-binary, and two-spirit people's lives. So another one of these questions is, how can we support changes to laws that create risk to all sex workers? That's probably you, Velvet. Yeah.
You can get involved by writing your MPs. You can contact us through the British Columbia Coalition of Experiential Communities. We do have a website. It's bccec.org, I believe it is. You know, you can, there's lots of Canadian organizations out there as well. The Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform is another one that we're also members of as well. And we have been since 2015, 16, lobbying the government, producing information. And for the most part, we're always cut out of the conversation. We are never included in anything. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is, after that legislation went through, the Conservative government implemented this $5 million allotment that, you know, organizations could apply for in regards to helping out sex workers, when really it was just a cosmetic front for exit strategies, for removing people, for basically paying people who really did nothing, but had an organization registered and don't do a damn thing. You know, nothing about us without us. So, you know, so many sex workers organizations are not at the table. They need to be included. You need to talk about it. And I think for the most part, I don't think, I know and I believe, is that sex work needs to be understood as work. It's not an easy job, and there are so many things involved to actually perform the task, if that's what you want to call it. Prior to that, you know, you've got to talk about advertising, you've got to talk about financial management, you know, your physicality, your appearance, you know, your art, for example, photography, videography, audio, all kinds of different things that go into it, fashion. And, you know, and a lot of sex workers I know have degrees. They're going through university, they're going through some form of school, doing whatever they're doing. So it's an acknowledgement, and it's a putting of your own ethical and moral dilemmas off to the side to understand that it's work. It really, truly is work. And I think that when people start to get that and believe that there is, labor involved. We're currently working with labor unions who are also in support of what we're doing, that we can move forward with it. Amnesty International, for example, as well, is also in support of decriminalization. And you can even go there and look at what their stance and what their view on sex work is as well. And one of the things that I always say to people too is we need to stop the perpetuation of the media statements that it's a high-risk lifestyle. That's ridiculous to keep on putting that out into the media, because people start to believe that's a high-risk lifestyle, which means that anybody engaged in sex or anything thereof, whether it's for remuneration or not, that sex is somehow a high-risk lifestyle, even for those who are not sex workers. Do you know what I mean? Because we could say, I have examples, like, for example, the gentleman who was dragged to death by trying to stop an individual from stealing gas from the gas station here in Richmond in BC. The woman who was brutally stabbed to death, who was 19 years old, in the Money Mart because she befriended an individual in the store, and so he could steal $63,000. The list goes on of certain jobs like that. And do we talk about those jobs as being high risk lifestyles or high risk jobs? No. Starbucks down around the corner from me, a manager who was stabbed to death there protecting one of his staff from an irate ex-husband. So, we need to stop that.
Thank you so much. So we're at the end of our panel already. Time has really flown by, and you've shared so much knowledge and experiential wisdom with us, everyone. As a wrap up, I offer each of you the opportunity to make a closing remark. We have about 3 minutes left or so, and I'd love to start off with Lenee.
Sure. I just want to extend a huge gratitude and thank you to the team at KDocs for your work in labor into hosting this event and honoring January's story. Thank you to January's family and friends, including Alex and Velvet, for trusting me and allowing me to tell her story. And thank you to the audience for being here today, especially on Trans Day of Remembrance. May we remember all those who have lost their lives to transphobic violence. And today and every day, may we honor January's legacy. May we honor those who came before us, those who have lost, those who have been lost, those who were taken from us. And may we honor them by fighting towards trans liberation and sex workers' liberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenee. Velvet, over to you for your closing statement.
I'll keep it short and sweet because I know I can be long-winded, but I want to echo what Lenee said as well. And I also want to thank her for having the opportunity to be interviewed by her, because when you do those kinds of things, you never know what the questions are going to be when they ask you and things like that. And it was such a pleasure to be in a room with such a warm woman. Elena was the same as well. And they made me so comfortable, and not that I could cry. And I think that's really important. And I really hope that kind of emotional response that I had is something that everyone here today listening and learning, and I like to throw in laugh a little as well, because without a bit of humor, some of us find it difficult to get through the day. And I just love everybody that's here and was a part of this whole thing. Like I said, there's so many people to thank. I'd be here for too long. And I just really hope that people have something to take away with this, that they can feel good about themselves. And if they need to or want to, please get a hold of us. We would love you as our allies.
Thank you, Velvet. Over to you, Jack.
I just want to say thank you to KDocs for doing this. Alex, Velvet, and Lenee, thank you for creating this amazing film about this amazing woman who was taken from us too soon. I just wanted to share a quote from, I recently read a creative nonfiction book by Andrea Bennett, who is a non-binary author. And it's just a quote that really stuck with me, and I think kind of sums up what we're dealing with here. It's, I need the world to make just enough space for me that I can become completely unremarkable. And I mean that in the way that I don't want us to stand out in the way that like it's dangerous. I want us to, like, I want trans people, I want people of color to just be here in the space and to be accepted and not looked at twice unless you want to be, unless you're wearing something that you want to be seen in, you know, like there's something wrong with being remarkable, but you know, just so it's not a thing, you know, so that asking for acceptance and to have a space in this world is not a thing, and that people won't think twice about it. So thank you for having me on this panel. I am honored to be amongst such amazing people. And thank you to everyone who's here and for taking the time to educate yourself. This is a great step in becoming a better ally.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Alex.
So thank you to Greg Chan and to Tara Lyons and everyone at the team at KDocs and Kwantlen President's Office, I believe, who helped sponsor this, and the team at VIF who helped to co-host this and who are helping with the technical aspect. I'm so glad we remember January today, but like I said, it's not just January, it's all the lives, all the victims of violence, all the trans women, all these innocent lives that have gone, and we need to remember them, and we need to create a world where everyone is safe. And now that we have Lenee here online and Velvet, I really want to thank them because this was really a passion project for me, and I was learning how to be a producer, and Lenee and Alina took on the challenge, and I'm so grateful that they supported us, and they did such a fabulous job. And also, it's not easy to make a film about transgender people without coming almost under attack from certain quarters of, you know, the community that I belong to, and as a gay male, to be making a film about a transgender person. And you know, Velvet was there for me the last 2 years when I had to talk to someone or get her advice on something, and she was, you know, stood by me and defended me. She said, "You just do what you need to do." You know, I was a friend of January, and our passion for her and the life she lived and what she meant to us, I really think everyone who was involved in the project did a great job. And so thank you, Velvet. Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Kwantlen College, Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And thank you, KDocs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Incredible panel. Round of applause for you. Thank you, audience, for being here. And I know you've learned something, and you're gonna go out and be better allies. Yes. So thank you for making this wonderful film, Lenee and Alina. It's really incredible to see this work, and we're all so excited to see what you all do next. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, everyone.